now. I'm starting to record. So recording has started, Lyle, now. So it is all now on the record. So thank you, Lyle. Thank you, Lyle, for making it, because had it not been for you, I probably would have said 5 words and would have gone home. Well, I am home, actually. So I have posted the lecture. We have summarized, we have actually recorded this morning. The lecture is critical for writing assignment 2. Students who think they can just sit down and write lessons on the basis of past experiences in schools will find it difficult with me.
I'll definitely watch it.
Yeah, and just relying on your experience in schools will not work, because what I'm trying to teach in this unit is forward thinking. I'm preparing my students to be visionaries and make their future, as opposed to repeat or replicate what is currently in schools, and not always it's a good practice. A lot of those practices in schools are based on the past, when there was no technology and when the language of pedagogy was quite confusing. And a lot of these confusions are still being perpetuated. So we need to cut through it. We need to prepare our pre-service teachers for future. And if sometimes you may feel that the lesson you designed for this unit might not be easy to implement in your school, that doesn't matter. One day you will be the teacher, you will have a technician at your disposal, and you will be in decision making, in a position of making decisions and discussing with principals how to create things and how to bring about change and progress, and you will have tools. So this is what I want. I want people who actually have critical thinking tools about literacy pedagogy and pedagogy altogether. I'm not interested in replicating what's in schools. This is an academic unit. This is not a prac unit. This is not a school unit. This is an intellectual unit. So there. So Lyle, you mentioned you found the assignment 1 quite challenging. As we mentioned, as I said before, there's a particular game to writing assignments. I might repeat it again. Not all students got that message, which is you define literacy, then you identify the features of literacy, A, B, C, D, and then each section of the assignment, whether it's reflections or your current practices, must address only those features of literacy you identified in your section 1. And you have to do it in a way that convinces me that you know what they mean. Because if students write to me on Facebook, what says my mother? It doesn't make her a critical, literate person. Just she clicks and watches my photos, right? So just saying that I'm on Facebook or I open web pages is not good enough. There needs to be a thorough reflection on what makes the uses of websites or LearnLine a critical practice. And the critical is very important, because in this last lecture that we had this morning on campus, and also in other lectures I have given, but especially today, because I know that the deadline is coming quickly, what I showed people is the kinds of little tools you can have to facilitate exploration and expansion. And that's what critical is. Critical is not just asking questions, but asking questions in order to proceed on an increasingly informed basis. Right? So it's not the teacher asking questions of a student, it's the teacher creating opportunities for students so that they can ask questions of themselves to see how well they are doing. On what basis do they make decisions of how to communicate, how to respond, how to approach people. And what we will be doing is creating opportunities using particular tools so that children can actually reflect critically, ask questions of themselves, and as a result, reframe their thinking. And that's called, in critical pedagogy, it's called the ultimate you want, which is the transformation. So the literacy experiences should lead children to some personal transformation. They are more expansive. They act on an increasingly informed basis. So that's what I understand as critical approach to literacy teaching or learning. So teacher's role is to create opportunities for students to actually ask questions of themselves and of one another, but of themselves ultimately you always ask of yourself because it's that internal dialogue that is running in your head about how well you're doing. And teachers will give you more facilities and opportunities to check whether you really, your guesses are correct or your beliefs are okay. So what these opportunities, these activities, or these resources that students create, and pardon me, teachers create for students, what they are opportunities for students to change the perspective from which they look at themselves and others. Right? Like in Polish, we have this saying that what you see depends from where you sit. You know, so your point from which you view things depends from the point of where you sit. So, if your activities and your resources and the tools you provide students with, based on those resources, what they do, they enable children to change the perspective from which they look at things, so that they can actually expand the vision from which they look at stuff, at themselves actually. And that's what I was after, more or less, in the assignments. I was trying to make students, to see whether students could work with the concepts they were introducing on page 1 in the definition of literacy, whether they could actually work with those concepts, rather than dropping them and then talking in a more flexible, leisurely way about their experiences in literacy. This assignment always produces a bit of a trap for students, I've noticed. And it's not a bad trap. It's still an educational path. What it does, students sometimes fall into the trap of taking this assignment a little bit leisurely. It is still an academic assignment, even if it's called portfolio. And that professional portfolio concept really means show off. It doesn't mean talk. This is not a diary. It's called professional portfolio. It says demonstrate, show off. You see, Lyle?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this lecture, and you can see the point that I'm trying to make, which is that the point of the teacher is to enable children to examine the understanding of the engagement, of the literacy engagement from different perspectives, so that they can actually integrate them more meaningfully in the context of a project, because the project gives them focus. We are all goal-oriented, so our goals give us focus, give us the lens through which we interpret. So for example, in some students' assignments I was talking about it, there's no such a thing like comprehension. I am fully aware, fully across what teachers say and the particular programs say. And you mentioned this in your assignment, or Ian actually. Ian, I forgot his surname. Ian mentioned that. He talked about NAPLAN. Very often teachers think of comprehension as a neutral thing. The text has a meaning. It doesn't. When you want to listen, when you listen to a song and you are in love, the song sounds to you differently than the same song when you're not in love. So the purpose, the lens through which you look, opens different interpretation paths. So there's no such
an emotional connection.
Well, for example, or if you, it just happened to me just the other day. I was listening to a song, and I've heard that song like 100 times, at least 1,000 times. And this time I heard it differently for whatever reason. It's an emotional connection, but it's also the reason why you're listening. So you might be listening just for entertainment, you don't listen to the words. You might be listening because you want to create a song, you're listening to the different breaks that the song has, the different ways in which expressions are made. You know, you're listening for different things, and therefore the comprehension of the song changes. There's no such a thing like meaning. It's how you work with it for your purpose. And what the teacher does with resources, they help you expand your understanding of that purpose. So you want to create an audiobook. Well, what do you think an audiobook is? Well, I don't know. Well, let's have a look at audiobooks. Right? let's have a look at books. So there are different books. There are normal books, print books, and then there are audio books. What's the difference? What do they have in common? Let's explore. What is the cover of the book? What's the difference? What's the purpose of the cover? Today in classroom I ask, why the stories have a beginning? What do you, Lyle, can you guess how many students answered that question? Why do stories have a beginning?
Probably not many people could answer it.
Exactly. That's the thing. So, but you can play with children, and I have a feeling that children, the 7-year-olds or 5-year-olds, will have 300 answers because they're still at the level of a genius. We haven't actually worked on them hard enough yet to destroy that. But yeah, it's really hard to actually say, well, stories have a beginning, they have to have a beginning, but each story starts differently. So why is that? If it's all about starting, why do stories start differently? You know, some stories start with, there was a lonely woman living on a farm. Another story starts once upon a time. Another story starts with, in the bed, out of the bed, to the window, through the window. It's a completely different, so what is it? There's an atmosphere. There's a different rhythm. It actually introduces people to the atmosphere, to the emotional climate of a story, if you will. So you can see, but you know, it takes a bit of reflection, and I'm not a genius. I actually just take time sometimes to think about it, because if I don't think about it, I have nothing to tell you. So I have to think about it, then surprise you, and you say that's ingenious, you must have read it somewhere. I never read it anywhere. I made it up as I stood there in classroom in order to actually give you some tools, because you need tools to pass them on to students. But so you can see, problematizing the task, the project, it's actually nothing else but providing students with opportunities to compare and contrast through resources so that they can actually understand what they are doing and make the task their own. And you, in this lecture that I gave today, I strongly discourage teachers from saying, okay, here's your cover book. Okay, we've done it. Now we do the title. What will you call your book? This. Okay, well, this is how you spell it. Right, we've done that. Now, how will we begin the book? And some teachers can actually do the whole story, the whole audiobook in one lesson. It's like a boot camp. Children explored nothing, produced the behaviors the teacher wanted, and we've got the cover book. We can go home now. It's just, learning is not about the pedagogy we use. It's not about completing the project in the way that the teacher wants. It's about providing students with tools so that they can produce something surprising, sometimes something weird, but sometimes amazing things. Like my students here in this unit, this semester, I mean, these portfolios, whatever mark you got, I think I have to say that there were very few passes. I think we largely had credits, distinctions, and high distinctions. It was a very good level. The same was in summer semester. As I keep saying, we have students from Mars. I have no idea where my students are coming from. But either CDU is getting a particular population of students that are just amazing. I have to say they are amazing pieces of work. So what we want to do is actually to have the same outcome as I have in this unit, which is the students make me problematize the task they're doing with the help of the teacher, and then they create something of their own mix. It's not a boot camp. And if sometimes some things will take 3 lessons, 4 lessons, so be it. You've got the whole term. Nobody's beating you to the beat of anything. And you might try new ideas in term 2 when you don't have any NAPLAN. But if you have NAPLAN, you can do for a while whatever they tell you to do, just to see that whatever they tell you in schools to do for NAPLAN probably ain't gonna work. But term 2, this expansive critical learning that you will generate will actually benefit also NAPLAN. And then maybe after a while, you might actually replace these bootcamp strategies of term 1 with something more explorative and something actually more possible to produce good outcomes for NAPLAN. I really honestly think that this kind of surface teaching is not leading anywhere. So there will be opportunities in schools to try new models. My own project is in literacy, and it's going to start in term 2, and we're going to teach it throughout the whole term in 2 schools, probably the entire population of year 1 and year 2. So there. And Ockerman is on it, and a few other professors are on it, and I'm the chief investigator. And we will be doing in term 2, we will be playing with children, experimenting and doing wonderful things. So there is time in schools for this progressive, wonderful work. We don't have to always feel pessimistic. So that's the assignment. That's the lecture today. The lecture today was really to say that critical means producing opportunities for children to explore their own power, how well they are doing, how are they understanding the task, how else they can look at it, what else it involves, and through compare and contrast activities, they can actually make their own choices, what rings the bell for them and what they don't want to use. So that's the kind of learning that I advocate. Because it's no different than what we do in real life. As I said in the lecture, you know, your eye can see because it can distinguish between dark and light. It's the contrast. It's the contrast that actually enables you to interpret what's in front of you. We don't see things. We see the shades of light. And then the brain interprets them however it does. Okay, so Lyle, we're there. What else? What else would you like me to discuss?
Just trying to think.
What I will be valuing? I will be valuing in the assignment, I think we spoke about it, but I kind of forgot how I talked about it. But in the assignment, I will be valuing an attempt to take a risk in order to produce interesting activities and unusual. I will not value grammar lessons. I will not value, you know, like 5 activities. I will not value conventional, stereotypical activities that have nothing to do with the unit. In this unit, we taught particular things, and these things I will want to say. I'm not assessing ELA 300, and I'm not assessing ELA 100. I'm assessing ELA 200. And that means that I want to see some benefits of this unit to my students, and therefore I want to see some ingredients of this unit in students' assignments. So not well thought through, but yet attempted activity and risk-taking and intellectual risk-taking I will value. While the opposite, which is no risk-taking, no intellectual attempt, no self-challenge, I will not value it much because, you know, we're at level 2 of the literacy program, and what we want to do is actually show that we actually have taken something on board. So risk-taking is great. Challenging yourself is great. If you get to a point that you say, I've done so much, but I'm not really sure what to do with it next, it's fine. I can cope with it. What I can't cope with is a boot camp and changing children to some little chimpanzees, you know. One thing that I said in the lecture today, and I will stress here on Collaborate, even if you do run a boot camp because you cannot teach well or you don't know how to teach well, statements that I will really, really not like to say are, you got to get your students to do this, you've got to get the students to do that. That's just such a bad vocabulary that, you know, if you really feel this way, try to rephrase it so that I actually don't say it. Get the students, I'll get students do this, I'll get students do that. I've seen that in students' work in the past. And it's just, and I haven't seen it just in students' work. I've seen it also. There's this guy, he's an associate professor from somewhere, and he came to CDU to give a lecture. I didn't even go. The abstract was so bad. You know, he was saying that the key to a particular thing he wanted to teach us was to get students do this.
What about instruct?
Well, I don't know. Can you instruct anybody? Why not create opportunities for learning? This is when I gave last week. I had a symposium on the projects that we all are doing projects, and there was a symposium where we had to talk about our projects and so on. And I was asked particularly, like one scholar said to me, because what I said, people found very new. The professors loved it. They said, you reconceptualized everything, and it's innovative, it's original, it's wonderful. But some staff, not necessarily from our school, but just some staff, found it very challenging. And they said to me, I can't understand what you're going to do, Anya. What are you going to actually teach? What will you teach? And I said to people, why is it that in pedagogies, and we talk about learning, we don't talk about teaching. Also, when we have offices of learning and teaching, we started to put the word learning ahead of teaching. So in theory, we value learning, not so much teaching. But when it comes to actually designing a unit of work, all of a sudden my staff is asking me, or some staff from this person was from somewhere, they're asking me, what will you be on your teaching? And I'm thinking I'm actually interested in learning. How can I create conditions for students to learn? What opportunities can I create for students to actually perform their task or project, but in a way that shows expansion and transformation? That's what I want to say. What am I going to teach them? I don't know what's in their head. I've got curricular outcomes, so I create resources so that students, these resources and activities I will design, they enable students to actually meaningfully engage with those outcomes. But typically what we do, we teach the outcome as if we knew the meaning. You don't know the meaning of anything, because the only meaning we have is in our own head. So what we want students is to actually engage in an exploration of a task at hand, so that they can actually expand what they have in their head. And that's learning. So my teaching, is, if anything, is about creating opportunities for children to expand what's in their head. So that lecture should actually flag all these things. So it's not instruct, really, because when you instruct, is you believe that you actually are holding something tangible. But where is it? It's only in our head. And how people then, that tangible thing you hold in your head, how people interpret it, it's as we say, they interpret it. So that's not tangible. It's only interpretations that we believe we're sharing, or we're not sharing. So rather than instruct, maybe we could say we create opportunities for children to see how they can actually transform their understandings of the task at hand, so that they can actually perform it informed. And then you judge. Whatever they did, does it show that they draw on a rich base of frames of reference, or is it still kind of narrow? If it is narrow, maybe you need to create some more either resources or activities that engage children in further exploration, so that their work shows that its base or draws on many frames of reference, on rich frames of references, as opposed to really something poor. So I would be really truly emphasizing creating opportunities for students to explore and therefore create things in an expansive way. And that you might call it learning. And that's the way to go. Learning is being emphasized. Learning and teaching are not synonymous, although a lot of people use them in a synonymous way. They're not synonymous. And I'll be emphasizing how you actually supported students' expansion. You could call it learning. How do you support students' learning? Or otherwise, how do you support students' expansion and transformation, reframing? Reframing of everything, of emotions, reframing of how they approach text, how they approach people, how they approach themselves in a particular context. Right? Learning is reframing. And you can only reframe when you could actually look at it from a different angle. You know how children get upset about something? How are you going to get them out of that place. Reframing through rhythm, through changing the rhythm, through changing the text, through changing a different perception of a person, right? So all of that are activities and enabling expansion. We can call them learning. So one of the things you will notice the way I teach my students, like I teach you, is that I am able to rephrase concepts. So if you talk to me about play, I will rephrase it. If you talk to me about learning, I'll give you ways of looking at the concept of learning. So I'm never stuck with a word, because words mean nothing. You need to explain your terms. And that's why I'm trying to now explain to you that instruction, I really wouldn't, what's the role of the learner? As a receiver? At the end of the telephone? By the way, I have written an email, not an email, a posting on the discussion board, because one of the students or some of the students were talking about receiver and a sender, which is really the 50s. I think it was like in the 30s that started, but people actually in the 30s were quite progressive. Then in the 50s something happened, and the model of a receiver and sender has come in. So it was like 100 years ago. But some people have not actually shifted from it. They still think that communication is between a sender and a receiver. So I had posted where the campus lectures are, on campus lectures. I made a little posting about it, so that people start seeing that, we talk through the history. So we don't send information to anyone. We draw on our history for an impact. And then whatever the person to whom we talk does with it, we still interpret their action by again drawing on our history to assess the impact of their reaction. So it's a very complex processing model, as opposed to sender receiver, and then there's a meaning in between, floating independently, as if it was clear, neutral, independent of people's histories. On the one hand, we say we can only interpret, and then when we have the sender-receiver model, we think that there is no interpretation. So instruction, how can you instruct when there's in the middle, you're dealing with people's histories? It's really complicated. So actually, rather than instruct, you create opportunities for students to draw on their histories in order to actually engage meaningfully. And that's harder. The illusion that we can teach someone something is very seductive, but theoretically it just doesn't make any sense. And they might actually reproduce the behavior you want. It still doesn't guarantee that you taught them anything other than just a single movement. It's like the chimpanzee, can you click here? Yes, I can. Can you click here? Yes. Well, I'm really happy you could. I instructed you and you did it well. But it has that linking to everything else. Well, it's not linking because it's a higher, like the direct instruction now that they are doing. I mean, it's so low intellectually and also behaviorally and culturally. It's just beyond belief how bad it is. And they also believe that there are basic skills and that there are higher order skills. And the higher order skills are not basic skills. They're doing this in Cape York.
I think it is Cape York,
what's the north of Queensland? What is it called? Yeah, in Aboriginal communities now they're doing this. And they're really proud, and I just found on some news letter that they said it's really effective. Of course it's effective, depends what you measure. If you measure sit, stand, and drop, then it's effective. But I would still challenge anyone to tell me what they call basic skills, and how do they know that these skills are basic? Is recognizing vowels a basic skill? How can they tell it? No, they just named it basic. And then they tell everyone they're basic. And then they've been saying this for so long, it's basic, that they actually don't know what it means anymore, and everybody believes it's basic. It's not basic. That's why it's so hard to actually acquire, because integration is not happening. maybe if we start and they say, well, we still do the first the basic, and then once children have gone through all these hoops, we would then teach them critical thinking. Oh, really? Maybe critical thinking is basic, and then because it's fundamental, 3 months old children do critical thinking. So maybe that's basic. So yeah, sad stories are happening in literacy. Desperate people are using desperate measures, and the reason why desperation prevails is because people don't have intellectual tools. They can't think critically, and they think, well, there's a method here. You know, it delivers. It gives children basic skills, and you know, those Aboriginal people, we just have to give them some basic skills. You know, because they don't come to school. You know, we've got this Aboriginal problem here. You know, it's just so irritating. So I don't know, for some reason they are doing this now. And
yeah, you don't hear much about Aboriginal instruction down here in South Australia.
So yeah, lucky, aren't we? In Darwin, sort of, but at this very moment, in Queensland, all this sort of backward stuff. Frequently in Queensland. Good things happen in Queensland and bad things happen there. So hopefully we will not see much of that direct instruction here in Queensland. I mean, direct instruction, I'm actually old enough, and I also have a degree in language teaching. And direct instruction was invented in early 20th century, and it was called direct method. And Berlitz School in the 30s used to teach through direct method or direct instruction. So look, we're looking 100 years ago, when we had we didn't have enough experience, we didn't have the intellectual understandings we have now, we didn't have technology, we didn't have tools, resources. I mean, we're 100 years later and we're still talking direct method. This is just sick. It's not just stupid, it's sick. So yeah, what I'm doing, Lyle, is trying to make you, like think a little bit that concepts like instruction or teaching are seductive. They give us a vision that somehow we achieved something, but sometimes they could be just a belief that just because the student behaves in a particular way, we think, okay, they learned it. But it's not that maybe that what we want. We're after integration of skills, not just a particular thing. So if you will see in the lesson, in the lecture I gave today, where I don't have a problem with smaller moves of smaller activities, but they need to be used in the way that allow as a help in order to do the project, not as in and of themselves valuable things. If a child needs to spell the title of the book, then maybe we can take them through games a little bit to explore how things are spelled, just in case they actually still have things they need to sort out. But they are sorting them out in order to finally agree between each other how to spell the title of the book. That's a different activity than today we do spelling, if you can see the difference. And that's why I'm encouraging different phrasing also. So we're not getting kids to do particular things, because what they do, they are engaged in a task, and this task was actually, the lesson one was so created that children, to actually so the children actually want to do it. They see a emotional reason why engage in this activity, and then that motivation, that emotional engagement generates motivation for everything else they do. So, and in order to perform this particular thing they agreed to do together, they will be actually exploring things, and we will be using games and so on as support to achieve the outcomes of the project they want to engage in. We're not doing these games or whatever so that children do what the games ask them. The games are just a tool. They are not they're not a goal in themselves. So you have a look at it. So yeah, this unit obviously is not preparing you for a PhD, but it's starting to give you some tools to see that we can look at concepts like teaching or instruction or getting children to do particular things. All these terms are not as obvious and simple as maybe sometimes it is we are made believe. So I'm just signaling it to you. It's very important we have these discussions about pedagogy, because sometimes you're in the second year, then you will be in the third year. And then what happens is a lot of students decide to do postgraduate studies. They have absolutely no idea about pedagogy, and they do masters. And they find it really hard, because they still function at the level that there is meaning and message is pure and neutral. And here we talk about interpretation, but we don't really know what that means, so we drop it. And then they have to write master thesis or do assignments in the master's program, and it's hard for them, hard. But once we at year 2 start complicating things, saying that there's nothing is so simple and so on, then at least when you move to year 3 and then later on into your professional development as a full-blown teacher, you have a bigger vision, and that's what I'm after. I want my students to be able to progress on the career ladder and start developing themselves, and then develop other people. And as they move from self-development to developing other people, they engage in greater range of responsibilities and they become executives. That's what I want. For that you need to have a vision. Doing what other people have been doing for youngs ain't gonna take you there. Okay, Lyle, anything else? What else should we cover? You've been such a helpful little soul.
That's all right. I think I tried to come to the
Nobody
last.
else can show up.
Not last week or the week before,
Okay,
and I think the week before that, and I think you couldn't get on.
I couldn't get on. One was a holiday, so I sort of forgot about it. But the other, there was some session, the first one or second one, I just couldn't. I don't know, my computer at uni is not really, I have a worse computer at uni, and I just couldn't, most of the time when I'm on Collaborate, I'm from home, because my own PC is just perfect. No surprises, nothing, every application works. Whereas today at 6 o'clock, the Learn line and everything will shut, right? So very often things don't work, or my computer doesn't work because the Java is not updated, and it's just like, yeah, I sent everyone an email by 6 p.m. Darwin time, which means in 1 hour, Learn9 will be off. That's why I sent you an email with the link to the lecture, so that on YouTube, so that you don't miss it. Because you might miss the PowerPoints; they're all on Learn9. But if you didn't download them yet, you still will have 1 hour to do that. But that's from 6 o'clock. Learn9 will be down till midnight. So much for my assessment of students' work.
I probably won't. I'll be studying.
Okay, Lyle, are we happy? Do you have any other questions? Do you think, Lyle, we should have another Collaborate session next week? Just to summarize the semester, or do you think nobody wants to be on it?
On the Monday, isn't it, the 2nd?
Yeah, but on the Monday, the 2nd, it is due. I'm happy to give a little bit of a leeway to students. But by the 8th or 9th, that week between 2nd and 7th, I would like to see the assignment coming in.
I would definitely have a collaborative session next Thursday, if someone was available on Thursdays. That would be probably really good.
Okay, so we might do that. That will give you and maybe other people opportunity to ask some questions. Some final questions, because a week after that, I expect assignments. relatively flexible about assignments, but not too flexible, because sometimes I was too flexible, and I noticed that students who got themselves into trouble. So as from the 2nd of June, I expect assignments that very week. So if someone sends it to me on the 4th, I will not die. But definitely past the 10th of June, it's too late. Because my project is also starting, and there's no way. I mean, I'm paying a lot of money for having scholars from overseas to come to Australia to do this project with me. And they come from the States and from Asia, and there is no way on the planet I'll have that much time.
What's your project about?
Well, the project, it's called Building Resilience in Primary Students, and it's in Darwin schools. I cannot mention which schools. And it's in literacy context. So I will have Year 1 and Year 2 students, where I will be teaching them well-being or resilience skills, but in the context of students learning literacy. So that's why here already you will see throughout my lecture and in this unit, I already have very often made links to emotional reasons why children are emotional beings, and actually working with emotions of children is very important. So I've already made those links in this unit just to signal that our students should start thinking of integrating the emotional curriculum, the well-being curriculum, in regular programs that they teach. So sometimes in schools they teach resilience as a separate skill, as a separate program. I don't have anything against it, but I think we could actually integrate resilience and well-being curriculum in regular programs, and that's what I will be teaching people how to do. We will be using music also to explore the emotionality of text through rhythm and music, because very often, when you work with children, it's really hard to reframe children's approaches or attitudes through words. Sometimes you might, because we are multisensory beings, sometimes you might do it with movement, with music, with beat, with emotion, with drumming, with applications which have percussion in them, so children can actually change their rhythm to actually look at the thing differently, so that the emotionality of text is experienced by children through their stomachs, not through their brain. You know, like as I said, the frontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex is not yet there. It won't be fully functional until they are 25.
25.
So working through emotions is very important. And exploring text. Yeah, and exploring text through emotions and through different levels of perception, through different systems of perception is also important. So you don't rely continuously on explaining and elaborating. That's just, it's just a little bit too prefrontal cortex, too much less brain activity.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we will be running this the whole second term. So starting end of July
is that
and
second
finishing
term
end of September.
Up there? Oh, okay. Are you
yeah, that's the second term in Darwin. Yeah. I don't know, I believe that in Darwin we have first term and second term on, and then there's a holiday in between.
What's your view on like using songs
there are
for
applications.
literacy teaching? What's your views on using like songs and music for literacy teaching?
It's great. That's what I will be doing. Absolutely great. It's a must.
Yeah, I've been
music
doing
and movement.
a bit of
Absolutely.
research on it for the this coming
walking
on music and song.
Yeah, yeah. It's not just song. It's also playing with the song in the way that allows children to look at the text or look at the emotionality of text differently, so you can slow down the song. You can speed it up. You can put more percussion and jazz up the beat. and all of a sudden the song looks different. There is an application. I was going to put it in our lecture. I might put a link about this application. One of our scholars, his wife and him are musicians as well, as he works in critical pedagogy. He's an associate professor. And they use all these things on their children before we do it in Darwin, the experiment on their own children. Yeah, and they use an application which allows, it is a percussion application, and it allows children on using the tablet to actually, it has a bass beat, but then they can actually speed up the beat, or they can add more percussion instruments, and all of a sudden what was a monotonous beat becomes a bit more jazzed up, becomes happier, and then children read to the beat. But now since the beat is faster and happier, all of a sudden they reframe the story, and you can say to them, how did the story feel now? A bit better, a bit happier. It's the same story, yeah, but I felt differently because of the beat. So what does this say? What does this tell you? We could think like this, or we could speed it up a little bit, and actually maybe not always bad. Because you see, we have children in schools that come to school with different emotions, from different families, being treated in many different ways, and with strange stories sometimes in their heads. Really strange and sometimes violent stories in their heads. So not always all children are happy. And the idea is now in the classroom to somehow reframe those perceptions so that the kids can actually start controlling their emotions. Not controlling, but having distance, starting to develop distance from what they see at home or in their communities. And it doesn't have to be a dominant Aboriginal. I mean, even in my own house, you know, I mean, my mother with my father had a history of a very difficult marriage. And me and my brother were stuck in between all of that. So children come to school with all these different rhythms, which are not always healthy. And if we could actually, through projects and through playing and reframing perceptions, make a difference, that'd be great. One of the things that, of course, people use is different forms of meditation, but not necessarily listening to the rhythm of your breathing. It could be otherwise, changing the rhythm of your walking and working with music. What else? Actually working with stories which are heartwarming stories, you know, about heroes, about people doing good deeds. Facebook stories, you know, when the bear is friends with a dog, or, you know, two animals get together to help each other. You know, they hunt together and they do things together. Just showing to children that love prevails, the well-being prevails, and it's very important. So I'm really happy that this kind of spiritual and well-being message is now really critical in our curriculum. We started paying attention to it, and that's really good news. Because, you know, you want to catch children emotionally when they're 7, 6, not when they are 36 and can't keep their life together. So I'm all for music. Now, Lyle, if you experiment with it, that's great. That means that you engaged in the unit in a way that you try to see how all this new stuff might work for you. And I really will value this. It's much better to experiment with ideas and challenge yourself than doing the conventional stuff, which is boring and probably theoretically not that coherent. So there. Have fun, because if you have fun with your design, I can assure you kids will have fun. And that's the idea, you know, like I have been to different schools around Darwin, and I've seen different principals, and some principals are really great. They just don't mind kids being crazy and doing things and being adventurous and innovative, you know. Some principals, of course, think that they are running a jail, but, you know, that's just a sad story.
I went to school in South Africa, and it was pretty harsh. My principal was real mean.
And the population was black or white
In
or
my
mixed?
school, it was a semi-government, semi-state school, so it was mostly white in my school. But my principal, he was still,
You know, so these people,
he was
these
still
are
very
regimes.
strict. He was still very strict. He was an
Was what?
Afrikaner.
Yeah. So they have regimes. They have regimes. They require behaviors because they're not interested in education. They just want discipline. So we do these things here, and at the end of the lesson, children are not enthusiastic. They don't feel that they achieved. They are just behaving the way we want them to behave. You know. So there you go. Well. But we're in Australia, and as much as we might not like NAPLAN, and as much as we might not like certain policies, I have to say to you that I have a different attitude to education. I think that there's a lot of promise in education, and there's a lot of good principles out there on the, and a lot of goodwill. And the very fact that I get a grant in order to do extraordinary things proves to you that not everything is lost, and there's a lot of goodwill.
There have been some really good teachers as well.
Yeah. Exactly. There's a lot of goodwill, and we're in Australia. And if we all start thinking critically and actually try to implement our goodwill, that's where the future is. And giving up and just replicating the past, it's not the future. It's the past. It's the past. And the idea is to have tools so that when you're 50, 45, 50, you still can find a job, as opposed to, well, we're not interested in you because you're doing the same as everybody else, and we want someone with fresh ideas, so we take new graduates. The idea is to actually have a good start that sets you on the path of innovation. So that you can work with these progressive principles, so that you can actually work with policies which are about innovation. And there's plenty of those statements in grants, in strategic plans of departments of education, plenty of those statements. So I'm not very negative at all when it comes to this. I just think that we as human beings, we generate negativity, so we have to live with some sort of bad decisions, but there's also a great deal of good decisions.
Yeah,
Lyle,
I don't think I have any other questions. I've got to go get my daughter from childcare as well now, I think. Yeah, it's 5 o'clock.
Lyle, it was lovely to talk to you, and we're going to have a session another week just to have some questions about the assignment too.
No problem.
Okay, thank you for your presence here. Thank you for a lovely conversation.
All right, see ya.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you. Bye.